The 1920s was a significant decade filled with new social changes that would free itself from the old ways of the Victorian past. The 1920s had the nickname of either the Roaring Twenties or Jazz Age. Jazz bands would dominate this decade, young women would show their rebellion by becoming flappers, movies became a huge business, and movie stars would grab the attention of the public. Also, dance movements swept through the nation.
During the 1920s, there was a movement for young women to be wild, free, and rebellious. Flappers rebelled against Victorian customs and wore dresses that came either to the knee or above the knee. The term flapper came from the movement which their dresses made when they danced. Flappers participated in activities such as smoking and drinking. The significance of a flapper's short hairstyle was that it was a man's haircut. Traditionally, women kept their hair long and was pulled up and styled on their top of their head. This process was time-consuming and made it impossible for the women to work. Overall, the pulled-up hairstyle symbolized that if you had money, you could live a life of leisure. But when women cut their hair, they were stating a fact that you can still live a life of leisure with a short haircut.
Jazz began in New Orleans in the early 1900s. Blues was the foundation of jazz music, and in the early 1920s, Gannett Records, an indie company located in Indiana, began recording jazz groups in Chicago. In the early 1920s, jazz music remained almost exclusively the sound of New Orleans, and it was during this time that the first real stars of jazz surfaced, such as King Oliver and Louis Armstrong.
King Oliver was a mentor and teacher of Louis Armstrong. He started the King Oliver's Creole Jazz Band in 1922 at the Lincoln Gardens, and his two famous songs were Edna and New Orleans Shout. Louis Armstrong was a famous trumpet player who was blessed with a unique trumpet style and voice. He was famous for a few of his songs such as Stardust, La Via en Rose, and What a Wonderful World.
The 1920s was largely dominated by silent films, which were films that were without synchronized sound. Most of the times, the early silent movies were often accompanied by live piano or organ music. However, some silent movies had live actors or a narrator. During the 1920s, silent films were either dramas, epics, romances, or comedies. Overall, the actors and actresses were treated like royalty. They had high-paying salaries, the best and latest fashion, and lived a life of luxury. Charlie Chaplin, Buster Keaton, and Greta Garbo were some of the most famous stars known.
The reason why the movie industry developed in Hollywood is because in the 1920s, Hollywood was the place to be. It was full of cars, celebrities, shops, restaurants, hotels, and theaters. In addition, there were also several large production companies competing for control of Hollywood. These two companies were later known as Paramount Pictures and Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer. In 1927, music and film were beginning to overlap because experimentation of sound in films was being used. However, even before 1927, live music was used in silent films, and some films included piano, organ, or even a small orchestra.
The influence that silent films had on culture was extremely beneficial since after World War I, many people were trying to escape the painful memories of war. Thus, when people went to see a comedy or any other type of movie, they were completely engulfed in another world filled with glamorous movie stars.
Dance styles during the 1920s were often fun and energetic, since they were mostly used to lighten up the mood and escape from the stress of World War I. Some of the most popular dance forms included the Lindy Hop, which was of the most popular forms of dance and was known as the original swing dance. Also the Jive, which was influenced by the Lindy Hop. The Jive had a lot of energy to it since it involved knee lifting, bending, and swinging of the hips.